The Ag Tribes Report is brought to you by Farm Test, a field trial design, execution, and analysis service that makes it easy to ask your fields which management practices perform best. To start your field trials, visit farmtest.ag. And Legacy Interviews, a service that video records individuals and couples telling their life stories so that future generations have the opportunity to know their family history. Here's Legacy Interviews customer Dave Helland on the healing and relief his parents felt after telling their stories.
I bought a Legacy Interview because when I was listening to the podcast and heard about it, I thought it was a great idea. And then my mom listened to your podcast, and she said she wishes she had that for her grandmother. And I said, well, why don't we do that for you and Dad? And she never considered it for them, but it just quickly became like a really good idea that they were excited about. My parents never in their life had such a long period of time where they spoke about themselves. At first, they were uncomfortable with that, but then quickly became comfortable and just realized how much of themselves they could get out there in that period of time where they are the focus. My parents enjoyed the experience, particularly my dad. He kind of struggled through his life of thinking he wasn't successful. Just didn't have the material wealth that he felt that he should have. And then as he was telling his story, talking about his family and his life as a whole, he realized that he had this extraordinary success. But he never really thought of it as success. There's this moment where his whole life, like, it all made sense now. And here's a man that just turned 80, and it's all because they just sat down and spent a few hours talking about their lives with you. My mom was so grateful to have this on video, to really see their thoughts of their own life from start to finish. And we've got that forever.
Welcome to the Ag Tribes Report, a breakdown of the top stories affecting the culture of agriculture, with your host, Vance Crowe. The report begins in 3, 2, 1. Let's begin.
Welcome to the Ag Tribes Report. I'm your host, Vance Crowe. Each week I bring you a representative of one of the many ag tribes that collectively make up U.S. agriculture. And this week I am joined by my good friend, Christina Hudson Kohler of Hudson Egg Farms. Christina has been the president of her New York Farm Bureau Young Farmers and Ranchers program and is currently serves on the American Egg Board. Christina, welcome to the Ag Tribes Report.
Thanks for having me tonight, Vance. Let's dive right in.
Yeah, well, we've only got 30 minutes, so we're going to cover the headlines and then head into your perspectives on some things. We have to break in with some breaking news. There have been some big stories happening, and the biggest breaking news, I think, of all is that ADM has halted their carbon dioxide injection at their Decatur carbon capture facility. So on September 24th, ADM detected potential movement of brine between different formations. This is a quote from their own letter that they sent to the EPA. And they had a spokesperson, Jackie Anderson, said that the incident presents no risk to surface or groundwater or to public health. But I got to tell you, the people around Decatur, Illinois are freaked out about it because there is a huge water reservoir right near where they put that injection site. And in the past, when pipeline leaks have happened, like in places like Sataria, Mississippi, it causes people to pass out while they're driving. It made kids have seizures. And when it spills into water, it can form into carbonic acid, which can alter the pH of water, making it more acidic. So as I'm saying all this, sounds terrifying. Everybody that's an activist was saying, see, exactly, this is a bad idea. Christina, what do you think? What do you make for this push for the CO2 pipelines and injection sites?
So CO2 pipelines have been around for 50 years, which I found surprising to know and learn. And we have 5,000 miles of pipelines, but that is projected to be much greater here in the future with investments for carbon capture. And so I understand the concern of clean water and the hazards that are coming along with this.
Yeah, to me, it's like hilarious in a way, right? It's like people automatically assume that if you're doing green technology, it's always good, right? You put in solar panels, you don't have to think about mining the metal, all the energy to put it in, the concrete you have to pour. when it comes to carbon pipelines, I always just thought like, oh, this is kind of a scammy way to be able to give industry work. But then when you go look at what's possible with the CO2 pipeline, apparently when they get a little crack in them, they can unzip like a zipper on that pipeline and really start pouring CO2 out there. So it just goes to show you that like just because it's a green technology doesn't mean that it's automatically good or safe.
Yeah, and the number one thing I looked at was to see if they were up here in the Northeast here in New York, but I see it's more down near Texas and the New Mexico region. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a big move in the world of carbon capture because ADM has been one of the big leaders. They're considered to be the forefront of it. And if they have to stop because they've had 2 leaks in the last, I don't know how long, it definitely means that something's up. All right. Well, we can't stay on that breaking news because we have a huge amount of other news going on, not least of which is everybody knows that the hurricane, if you've been watching anything going on in North Carolina, you've seen the destruction in Georgia. But what you may not know, and this is from wattag.net, that U.S. poultry industry has been really harshly hit by Hurricane Helene. Almost half of the more than 9 billion chickens farmed for meat in the U.S., broiler chickens, are raised and slaughtered in this region. Georgia is the nation's top chicken producer, processing over 1.3 billion chickens annually. And just this weekend, the governor was saying we've had 170 poultry facilities damaged or totally destroyed. Dairies are destroyed. All kinds of other facilities. So this is a real catastrophe. It's actually one of the big reasons I wanted to have you on. You know a lot about poultry. If you are in the situation where electricity has gone out, you don't have roads, what are you as a poultry farmer doing, presuming you still have barns left?
Yeah, the first thing that we're going to check is to see if we still have the capability to use our on-site generator to produce power. And then once we have determined if we have that or not, we're going to think about things like airflow in the barns. Our number one priority is keeping hens and broilers healthy and safe for as long as possible, how we will get chicken feed to them, and their access to water. So those are the things that come to me first and foremost when it comes to chickens.
Yeah, what a wild time. I've been seeing this stuff on X that people are posting these videos, and you see this destruction, and it is absolutely catastrophic. And now when I was looking into this poultry issue, I mean, people are talking about this really impacting the supply chain, prices going up when you cut that much out of the market, not just the chickens that died, but just their production capacity that's taken offline.
One report that I did read coming off of Q3 here was that we did have a lot of turkeys in cold storage from last year. So I'm not sure if we'll be as concerned about this year's Thanksgiving turkey, but it's just definitely something to monitor as the story unfolds and more numbers come in, because this has been catastrophic to that region. And my thoughts go out to the families, and I hope they get the resources that they need.
Well, when you're planning, you have a big farming facility, you have to have emergency plans. What type of planning can you do for such a big catastrophe?
So one thing that's available is actually like a disaster response certification program. And there's one coming up through Cornell Cooperative Extension here in the next couple of weeks. It's a 2-night, 6-hour course that can help you think through the things that you would need to think about how to communicate. We have radios here. But it's beyond that. It's so much more. And having that emergency service plan, I was thinking about that we're working on that here in Onondaga County to have an inventory of our resources that are available and what the actual plan is. Because if you don't talk about the plans, how will you know what you're going to do? So have those conversations.
Yeah, I used to work in public radio, and when I came in there, they didn't really have disaster management plans. They just would be like, hey, there's a fire, we're going to report on it. But just the very act of sitting down and being like, what could happen, how would we handle it, starts to get the ball rolling. So if it can happen where a hurricane can impact people way up in the mountains of North Carolina, it can happen anywhere. All right, we're going to keep moving because there continues to be big news. The port strike couldn't come at a worse time for farmers. This is from Farm Futures. Currently, there are 45,000 dock workers at 36 ports across the United States. 6 of these ports are in the 10 busiest ports in the U.S. And some of the goods that aren't moving, they're not grain because that moves in a different way. But many of the items are things like medical supplies, perishable foods, toys, automobiles, and raw materials. And we're already seeing about 62 container ships have scrambled, said, hey, if we can't unload here, we're going to try and find somewhere else, whether that's another country, another port, or just coming to anchor. And the big thing is everybody's talking about the 77% salary increase, but really what the ILA is talking about is a total ban on the automation of cranes, gates, and container moving trucks. This is a big deal. If you look at any of the Chinese ports, there are no people around there. They are all just moving on trucks. And so you can understand why if your job was, doing this work, you would want to keep it. But, also automation allows our goods to be much cheaper. I want to throw out that right before we came on, Grain Stats, one of the great follows on X, posted an article from CNN that said that apparently the union has found a deal and will be going back to work on Friday. So this is breaking news. I didn't have time to corroborate it, but let's talk about it from your perspective, Christina. A big strike breaks out. Is it impacting you with New York farming?
Absolutely. One thing with New York is that we have New York City that needs to eat, and a lot of food goes through Hunts Point. And I think about also the other industries that rely on the ports to either ship scrap metal. But here in Syracuse, we're not too far from the port of Oswego that is actually still open because they negotiated an agreement back last month that is good through 2028, and they have the capacity to move grain, but they don't have the ability to move containers. But I can't think of any other industry that would be able to say no to automation. If I said no to automation here in ag, that was the mind-blowing thing is I want more automation. I want more technology to assist me in my job. So I guess that was one thing that I struggled with understanding.
Yeah, I mean, the longshoreman was one of the early experiences I had with unionized workers. I had experienced it a little bit when I lived in Wisconsin and I was building roads. But then when I got out to working on a ship as a deckhand, you would encounter these longshoremen that had these rules. And we were a small passenger ship. So if somebody didn't come in the window that you had for you to set their luggage out, and then a longshoreman would walk it from the dock over to you, and then you would carry it up the gangway. So they were basically just strolling luggage, and you had to pay them tens of thousands of dollars to do this. And if a little old lady came, outside of that window by even 1 minute, they would not allow any of us to help her. She had to go and carry it herself. She had to move it. And you would just see how they had all this power, because if they caught a cell phone photo of you doing any little bit of work that was considered their work, they would fine you the amount that it would take an entire team of longshoremen to do a work for an 8-hour shift. This kind of thinking, I don't know when it was valuable, but I know right now it is impeding people when they need prices to go down the most.
Yeah, and I know the number one thing that I'm hearing on my end is moms saying, how will I explain to my toddler that they're not going to have bananas in the grocery store because of these shutdowns at the port? So it's far reaching the waves and ripples of the strike.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see right before the show, before I read from Grain Stats that they may be going back. Now, that's unconfirmed, but the Florida National Guard and the Florida State Guard were being deployed by Governor DeSantis, who said, look, we have some of the most important ports in the entire world, and we can't be shut down by this. So whereas the federal government, who normally steps in these situations, didn't step in, said, we're going to let them work it out. The state of Florida said, hey, we're going to step in here and start, making these ports move.
And we need things to move, especially with the hurricane, Helene. We have families that need these resources and the goods that are available to rebuild. And though that impact is going to be huge. So this combination of strike and hurricane is not a great time.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to the final headline. All our gods are dead. The Libertarian Representative Thomas Massie gives a huge shout out to Vani Hari, aka the Food Babe. Late last week, the representative reposted a tweet of Vani Hari testifying before Congress about ingredients in U.S. food that are considered to be toxic in Europe. And so I have a personal knowledge of this. For about the last 5 years, Ag's been able to shift their focus away from tell your story, these are the reasons you need to have GMOs, these are the reasons we use pesticides, because the activists went away. The GMO fight calmed down for a while. A lot of the attention went to the glyphosate lawsuits. Well, now activists are coming back up. And once RFK joined forces with Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson started having some of these people on that are saying the reason the obesity crisis is happening, the reason that we're having such poor health outcomes is because of the things that are being sprayed on your crops. And, we should consider all things. There's no such thing as settled science, right? If somebody knows something we don't know, then we want to know that. But I can say that a lot of the tactics that Vani Hari is using is taking words that sound really scary, putting them up on a giant board and saying, this is in your kid's Skittles, instead of worrying about all of the processed sugar, just the huge amount of sugar that you're getting for it. So I think that ag is going to be in a position where their former political home, which was the right and the libertarians saying, hey, give ag the ability to do their work with the technologies they need. I think that's going to go away. And ag is going to be in a very, very difficult fight for technologies. Christina, are you seeing this flippening where ag is not going to have the same political home it had in the past?
Well, I am seeing these discussions about what is healthy food and what is nourishing to our bodies. And I think that's where the conversation actually starts, is to think about what you are fueling your body with and how you are feeding your families. We all have choices. And you mentioned sugar, and it's in everything, and it is addicting. And when I think about my personal sugar intake, it is high. And so I'm making choices. But everyone should be reading the ingredients on their food and understanding how to nourish and fuel their bodies.
Yeah, I think that this is the big story in ag. If I am in a Farm Bureau group anywhere in the United States, I am paying attention to this issue because when I was in the kind of pushback about the reason that you want to have GMOs or the value of them, that was one thing. GMOs they're very complicated science, but they're easy to discuss. When you start talking about chemistry that you're using to do crop protection, this is much, much more complicated. It is very specific. Toxicology is very difficult. Parts per million, parts per billion. This is very difficult. So if I were a group charged with making sure to preserve technology, I would be watching what's going on and I would be trying to get into this conversation, not sitting back thinking it's going to go away like the GMO fight did. Any last words on that?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is actually the shelf life of food and our access to food, and what how do you balance all those things that we rely on for our fast-paced society.
Yeah, I mean, as a father, I know I get bread from the grocery store, and we had buns that we got, and I realized the bread that I got that was made just that day, it molded after about 4 days, and the buns that I had, they were no mold after 3 weeks, and I threw them out because I was like, something's not right about this.
Isn't that weird? Yeah, exactly. So I think that's just one thing to pay attention to. You can use your observation skills and make choices for your family.
Well, I want to thank everybody that sent me headlines. Christina did a great job, but also Grain Stats is posting great stuff on X. If you have stories that you think we should be covering on the Ag Tribes Report, go ahead and DM them to me on X at Vance Crow. All right, now moving on to the Bitcoin land price report. Christina, you said you live in Onondaga County in New York. What's an acre of land cost out in U.S. dollars in Onondaga County?
So for prime tillable soil, that would run you about $6,000 an acre.
And this week's Bitcoin price is down a little bit from the last few. It's $60,753 per Bitcoin. So it turns out that 0.1 Bitcoin would buy you an acre of ground in Onondaga County. And that means that if you had 1 Bitcoin, it would be worth about 10.1 acres of prime farmland in Onondaga County. How does that sit with you, Christina?
It was actually surprising. We are seeing some changes here in our land prices with Micron, the proposed to come, and we are the second highest real estate market, or hottest real estate market in the US. But I am open to the option of buying resources with Bitcoin. And also, fun fact, our food bank they accept Bitcoin too as a donation. And so it's in our food system, it's in our food supply. And I think the wave of Bitcoin is coming. So it's good to be talking about it.
Oh, you are one of the first guests to be like on board. I guess there was Zach Smith and maybe a few others, but you're the first one to be like, it's coming. I think that every ag group should be talking about this. Farm Credit should be talking about this. Bitcoin is going to have a huge impact on ag, even if it hasn't just yet. All right, now we move on to the Peter Thiel paradox. This is where I ask my guest, Christina, what is one thing that you believe that almost no one you know agrees with you on?
My Peter Thiel paradox is I believe that our food here in the United States is actually too safe, and that is why we're seeing issues with gut health, digestion, metabolism, and I just wonder what these food safety regulations are doing to our digestive system.
So what do you mean by that? How do you think the healthy food system or the safe food system is hurting our microbiome?
Well, I see the push to introduce probiotics and prebiotics into your diet and your regimen with your multivitamins. And I don't know if that's actually a push because they're just trying to market the next product and the next wave of what healthy is, or are we missing things because our food is so safe that maybe in the past we would have been exposed to other microbial things that would aid or help our digestive system, that because things are so clean and so pure, we need assistance now? And that's my question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it seems to me that the hygiene hypothesis is real. The people that have dogs and cats in their homes tend to have far less allergies. I would guess that people that are living on farms similarly have these types of things. I was thinking when you were describing that the food system may be too safe is that just the amount of regulations isn't actually making our food any safer. It's just the unending bureaucracy that makes you have to jump through hoops that isn't actually getting us any closer to safe food. It's trying to solve, one crisis happens, and then in order to resolve that problem, they come up with rules, but those rules stay in. So maybe if you were on a dairy farm, maybe the hygienic conditions weren't that good before, and now there are rules on the level of pasteurization, what you have to do to check all these boxes are outdated and maybe keeping us from having a healthier food system.
I can feel the pitchforks coming for me now, Vance. So, but no, I think there are a lot of regulations that do make it burdensome to produce food. And also, it's just time, and we can be pulled in so many different directions. And maybe it's just virtue signaling.
Yeah, and I mean, just you said about the pitchforks. I mean, this is very real in agriculture. That there are institutions and there are people inside of those institutions that, for really good reasons, are saying, no, we need these rules. Look, I knew somebody that got sick in this way. This is really dangerous. But what really happens is you can't have a robust dialogue. It's very difficult to talk about what's really going on. What could we do to make things better? Because people are like, no, we know what's right. We know what the right thing is. And a lot of the checkoff dollars and the money that's used to promote things also puts restraints on what people can and can't say. And I think it's really stifling important conversations about food safety and food health.
Yeah, so I'm glad to be part of the conversation, and maybe this will spur others to just think critically about the choices and the regulations and the world and environment that we live in.
Well, I am going to go out and say you get an 8.9 for yours. This is quite good, I think, largely because you're going out on a limb and saying something that a lot of large groups don't want you to say. So good luck with the pitchforks in the next in the coming days and weeks. All right. Finally, on to the worthy adversary. This is where we spotlight people that we respect and yet disagree with. And we do this in order to get out of our ideological echo chambers. I keep a list of worthy adversaries on X so that anybody that's saying, hey, I want to listen to these people, find out what they're all about. So, Christina, let's turn to you. Who is somebody that you respect but strongly disagree with on social media?
The number one person that came to mind to me was New York Farmer. I do enjoy reading her content and engaging with her posts, but there's some times that I'm like, oh, that wasn't it. Or, ooh, you're going to catch, more, flies than, using honey. And so some of her approaches are a little gruff for me, but, she's been in the industry longer than I have. And as the small farmer, the medium-sized farmer, I think she has a very critical story to tell about where U.S. ag is and consolidation and the rural American story and the challenges that they face. So I appreciate her insight. I appreciate her feedback. But there are times that that would be mine.
I think that's a great answer. I've definitely seen that gruffness and some really coarse words zinging past on X, or back when I saw New York Farmer a lot more on Twitter. But I think that this is a really important voice. I went to her feed today, saw that she's talking a bunch about how to help farmers that are being affected by the hurricane. And you see this like old school kind of dairy that used to speckle all of Pennsylvania and New York, and those things are going away. So she's fighting the good fight out there. All right. She will get added to the worthy adversaries. That was a fantastic one. I really appreciate that. So we are going to wrap this up for tonight. I want to thank our sponsors, farmtest.ag, where you can use a system to scientifically test what products you are putting on your field to determine if they are working the way that their marketing materials are suggesting, and from Legacy Interviews, where you can sit down and have your loved ones record their life stories so that future generations have the opportunity to know their family story. And as we heard in the advertisement in the beginning, we oftentimes when people tell their stories, they get to look back and recontextualize so much of what they thought about their lives. So if you're interested to learn more, go to legacyinterviews.com. Christina, thank you so much for coming on. If people wanted to get a hold of you to aim pitchforks your way, where would they do that?
I'm Egg Girl Hudson on Twitter and also on TikTok. And I'm private on Instagram, but come find me. And I'd love to have a chat and learn. And I'm very curious. So thanks.
Well, this was a great Ag Tribes Report. Thanks so much for coming on. Join us next week for another Ag Tribes Report with guest co-host Bill Bullard of RCAF. That's going to be a wild one.
Ooh,
too.
Yeah.
And so, as always, feel free to disagree.